Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here. My name is Kat and I make houseplant videos here on Good and Planty. If you just so happen to absolutely love this video, please consider liking it, commenting, subscribing, or following me on Instagram. All of these things help me grow my channel like a plant. Alright, you asked for it, you got it. Today is all about begonias. We will be talking water, light, humidity, temperature, propagation, fertilizing, all of that so that you can take the best care of your begonia indoors. Because there are begonias that are popular for outdoors, but that's not what we're talking about today. I will put time codes up on the screen and in the description box down below so that if you are here for one little question, you can go ahead and skip to that section of the video. I'm also adding a slight disclaimer that I like to add to all my genus videos. The care tips today will be a little bit generalized. I'll try to add a little bit of nuance here and there, but there are so many begonias and different classifications of begonias, which we'll jump into in a minute. So I always like recommending doing a little bit of extra research on your specific begonia if you know its name, so that you can get kind of like tailored tips. But this will give you a general idea on begonias. And today I will be talking specifically about Rex begonias and cane begonias. Some real quick background on these plants so that you are equipped with begonia knowledge. These plants are tropical, so you'll see that come up in the care tips that I'm gonna share. And according to the SPCA, they are toxic to pets. Just try to keep them away from your pets to be safe. The toxic parts of the plants do live below the soil, but just to be safe, keep them away from your pets. There are over 1,000 species of begonia. There's a lot of begonia. Within those species, there are several classifications of begonias, and the two that are most popular for indoors are Rex begonias and cane begonias. So that is why I'm talking about those specifically today. Cane begonias that you can see, here's one example. They are grown primarily for their foliage. They do flower, but the foliage is kind of like the main star of the show. The extremely popular angel wing begonias, which this is an example of one. It's kind of like this teardrop shaped angel wing-esque leaf shape, that they do fall into the cane begonia classification. What really makes them stand out is they have these cane-like stems which look a little bit like bamboo, and that is where they get their name from, and that is one easy way to tell if you have a cane begonia versus a different kind of begonia. These plants grow vertically, so they will grow tall. I think they can reach a couple feet actually. Just keep that in mind if you are looking to bring a cane begonia into your home. Now let's talk a little bit about Rex begonias. They are definitely one of the most finicky begonias you can take care of indoors. I would say they are the most finicky begonia you can take care of indoors. I absolutely recommend trying out a more common and cheaper Rex begonia before moving into more expensive begonias, because Rex begonias can absolutely get expensive and they are hard to take care of. So I would try out caring for a cheaper one before moving to a more risky begonia. Again, these plants are definitely grown for their foliage. They do flower, but the foliage is like the year-round star of this plant. Their leaves are going to be a little bit more textured than cane begonias. These leaves are definitely more hairy and come in a wider variety of colors, I want to say. These plants, this is a tip that I have come across, and we'll dive more into care, but these plants don't like to be moved, I've noticed. That's a little bit of a miscellaneous tip that I wanted to slip in here. If you have a Rex begonia, try not to move it too much. Once it acclimates to a certain environment, I think it likes to stay there. I don't know how to say this word, but Rex begonias fall under rhizomatous, and that just means that they grow from rhizomes. They are kind of like a subclassification under rhizomatous begonias. Because of that, they definitely grow more compact and will kind of like spread out and creep over time. So while the cane begonia is more of a vertical growing plant, you can expect your Rex begonia to definitely take up more horizontal space and kind of creep out and spill over the pot. So with that background knowledge in mind, let's jump into the care of begonias. I'm trying to figure out how to like display this plant the best. It's so hard. Okay, this will do. Let's kick things off with water. Begonia in general do like to stay consistently moist, but I will say that they can definitely be adjusted to be a little bit more drought tolerant. I know my begonias have. I do my best to keep them evenly moist over time, but there are definitely weeks that I let them get a little bit drier than I normally would, and they totally survive that and are okay. Rex begonias are definitely a little bit more sensitive to that than cane begonias. The thing that I do want to note though is their root systems. Both of these kinds of begonias have pretty thin and fragile root systems that are definitely susceptible to root rot. Even though they do like to stay a bit moister, I'm going to emphasize that underwatering is better than overwatering with these plants. If you keep them too soggy for too long, you will definitely run into some root rot problems. On the flip side, if you're being a little bit too cautious and underwatering the plant too much, you'll definitely see signs. These plants are drama queens, especially the Rex begonia, and they will let you know that you are underwatering them. The leaves will start to shrivel up and crisp. Again, this is a little bit more apparent on the Rex begonia, and also you will definitely see some stem drooping on both of these plants. So to recap, definitely likes moisture soil, but always err on the side of underwatering than overwatering because you don't want to run into root rot. On the moisture meter, because I always like to include the moisture meter, I would say probably about a 3 as consistently as possible. Oh, I also forgot to mention all of the products I'm mentioning, like the moisture meter, for example, will be linked down below. I have a link to my Amazon storefront, and all sales in that store help my channel out a little bit, but I recommend those products regardless. Okay, moving on to light. These plants, as with every other tropical plant pretty much, love bright and direct light. What that kind of means is I keep most of my begonia, I think actually all my begonia, under grow lights, and they do fine. If I have to put my begonia in a window, I would say western facing is ideal. Maybe eastern facing as well, but I would monitor to make sure that it's not too much exposure. Again, you really want to do indirect light, so to the side of a window is best. You have to put it directly in the window. Maybe put it in a window that's like by a tree, or put up like a sheer curtain that kind of diffuses the light a little bit. Those are all ways to incorporate bright indirect light for your plants. Rex begonias can definitely handle a little bit of lower light conditions compared to cane begonias, but I have never really tested that out. All of my begonias do get a pretty decent amount of light under the grow lights. If your plant is getting too little light, you will definitely see some stretching out and legginess. For Rex begonias, maybe you can see that they're kind of like stretching out to get to a light source. With cane begonias, maybe the distance between the leaves is getting, you know, a little long and it's looking a little sparse. That probably means it's getting too little light. That happens, totally fine. The plant can bounce back. Just move it to more adequate lighting conditions, and if you want, you can definitely prune the plant back or propagate the plant, which we'll talk about later. If your plant is getting too much light, which can totally happen with begonias, their leaves are a little bit sensitive, again, especially the Rex begonia, you'll probably see some burning splotches and crispiness of the tips. Soil and repotting. With these plants, I use the same soil mixture that I use for all of my plants. I will link the video where I give my soil recipe up above. Yeah, even though they do like a little bit more moisture, I don't really amend the soil any different for them, to be quite honest with you. Whether you use my soil recipe or you're amending, making your own soil, the goal should be to allow some aeration so that the water isn't sitting in the soil and again causing root rot, but at the same time you do want the soil to retain enough moisture that your plant actually has something to drink. Regardless if you have a Rex begonia or a cane begonia, they do like to stay a little bit more root bound, again because the root systems aren't super thick and strong. They kind of don't like to be touched all that much, and it does take a long time for them to outgrow their pots. If you're noticing that your plant is outgrowing its current pot, and what that usually looks like is you'll see their roots kind of starting to poke out of the drainage holes out of the bottom, only go up like in the next pot size. I had a plant that was in a 4-inch pot and I bumped it up to a 6-inch pot. I wanna mention that the foliage of these plants grow so much and it will grow so big, but that does not reflect the growth of the root system. Even though the foliage is growing like probably exponentially for you, that doesn't mean that the roots need more room to grow. In terms of the type of pot I would go with, for cane begonias, they're definitely more easygoing, as you've probably picked up on. This cane begonia is in a nursery pot, no problems, and I also have a different cane begonia in terracotta, again, no problems. With the Rex begonia, I definitely recommend sticking with a nursery pot or some kind of pot that's not porous like terracotta. Either way, I do like to go with a bit of a shallower pot, especially for Rex begonias, because their root systems don't really go that deep. You don't want to overwhelm the plant with too much soil. I don't like live by this. Some of my plants are in very typical like longer pots, but that's something I like to keep in mind when I'm repotting my plants. Okay, and the last thing on this topic is that for cane begonias, I would kind of assume that eventually you're gonna need to put some kind of stakes into the pot and provide support to their stems. And with the Rex begonia, you're gonna wanna give this plant some space. Humidity and temperature. Temperature with these plants is pretty simple. If you're comfortable, your begonias are probably also going to be comfortable. That looks like 65 to like even 85 degrees Fahrenheit. The major thing that I want to point out is no drafts. As far as humidity, a lot of begonias will, honestly all begonias will prefer humid environments, which is like 45% and above, but not all begonias need it. My plants, they do sit close to a humidifier, but I'm kind of bad with like refilling it and keeping it going. My plants are pretty used to not having an extra boost of humidity. They are pretty used to like my average home humidity, which my guess sits at about like 25%. Get to know your begonia. There are definitely begonias that require very high humidity, terrarium environments, but most begonias can kind of acclimate to average humidity percentages. One thing I will say about that and my plant's flexibility is that the begonias that I brought home from very humid and ideal environments like greenhouses did have a hard time acclimating at first, especially Rex begonias. They had a lot of leaf loss over time, and I only noticed the plant fully bouncing back when it kind of shed all of its older leaves and the newer leaves that were acclimated to my home started taking over. So if that starts happening to you when you bring a begonia home, just go ahead and prune as you go as the older leaves start to die, and just monitor new growth to make sure it's adjusting well. Last note on humidity is I definitely encourage you to not mist your begonias, especially Rex begonias. Begonias are very susceptible to bacterial and fungal issues on their leaves, so misting and letting that water sit on your plant can definitely promote some problems, and that will typically look like your leaves crisping up and falling off and the plant kind of looking a little sickly and dying. If you are putting your plant near a humidifier or an area where moisture could be sitting on the leaves, I absolutely highly encourage you to put a fan somewhere nearby. Again, not like a cold draft, like a window or something like that, but just adding air circulation by the plant so that the moisture isn't sitting on the leaves. That happened to me and this plant. Me and this plant go way back. It was my first begonia before I knew anything. I knew that they liked higher humidity, so I put it by a humidifier. I don't have a fan in my room, and the moisture from the humidity was just sitting on the leaves, and I had a huge bacterial problem. I had to prune the plant way back. It was also in terracotta, so I don't think I was watering it adequately enough, and it was just like shriveling up and dying back. So I put it in a nursery pot. I moved it away from the humidifier, and I just monitored new growth, and eventually it bounced back just fine. It just wanted to be away from the humidifier and in a little bit moister soil. Fertilizer. The main key with fertilizing and these plants is to go gentle and remember that less is more. It all comes back down to the fragile root systems. Currently, I'm using liquid earth every other water. It's working just fine. I will probably be doing that during the winter time as well because it's technically like plant food or whatever and not an actual fertilizer. I have also used espoma on these plants, but I think it might have burned my Rex begonias. I was only using it once every 2 weeks, but maybe it wasn't diluted enough or something, and the Rex begonias just were not a fan, as with a lot of things. So if you want more information on fertilizing, I do definitely like a deeper dive in how I mix my fertilizers in my fertilizing video, which I will link up above. Go ahead and check that out if you have fertilizing questions, but those are the brands that I have used. But I definitely recommend heavily diluting the fertilizer more than the bottle says to, and not using it more than like twice a month. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is propagation, which with these plants is super easy. I have tried spag propagation and soil propagation with these plants, but my favorite hands down is water. And that is true for both Rex and king begonias. So for both of them, just go ahead and cut a piece of the stem off. You don't need a node for king begonias. Let that cutting just sit out for like an hour and kind of callus over on the bottom. Once that hour is up, just stick it in some water. Change out that water at least once a week so that it's sitting, you know, in clean water. And then once the roots hit about 2 or more inches, it's kind of hard to say how long you want your roots to get because it depends on the size of the cutting. You want it to be proportionate to the size of the cutting, but I would say 2 inches or more is a good time to pot it up in the same soil that I talked about earlier, and just go ahead and water it, keep it moist, and you should be good to go. Okay, so that was a lot on begonias. I think this is actually one of my longer care videos. There's just so much to say about begonias. There are so many begonias and differences in the care. Again, I really encourage you to look into your specific kind, but if you're just someone curious about begonias and begonia care, I hope this was very helpful to you. If you have any questions, please comment them down below and I'll do my best to answer them. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more planty content from me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!